Good afternoon, guys. How's it going? Um, I hope you had a great weekend. You're ready for this new week. This is actually week number 7, and we're doing pretty well. I'm going to go ahead in a little bit and give you some feedback on your submissions. I had some interesting emails and conversations about your proposal. So we're doing pretty well. Keep thinking about what you want to submit. Keep working on it. Start slowly so you don't rush it and you don't stress at the very end. But in general, we're doing pretty well. So I'll go ahead and start with the feedback, and then we'll go um, over what we have for this week. I'm going to remind you what you need to submit by Sunday, and that will be. So before I even have my notes here, before I even go over some specific items and give you those averages, the average scores that I usually give you per LO, I want to say that you should be a little bit careful. I fixed it manually, but today significant amount of students submitted the LO and then reopened the LO, and I could see that you just left it open, and it will be graded based on your latest submission. So a couple of you got zeros, or 3, I don't remember, which I fixed it, but just be careful, because if you miss it and then I'll miss it, you're gonna get a grade that is not fair. It doesn't represent the level of your knowledge of whatever chapter we have covered, okay? All right, so we had 2 LOs. LO 10, 83%. One item I want to address is the one that talked about cross-validation. And I want to ask you, is it about the same or different tests? If you go to page 191, 191, you will find the answer. If you still have questions, let me know. That was it about LO10. Let's go to LO11. 86%, the average score. And there was an item about analgesic drugs. Are we taking them before or after a procedure? Before or after a procedure? If you go to page 205, you will find the answer. And if you still have questions, again, let me know. For this week, we're covering LO 13, which is about ethics, and you'll see there are a couple of things that overlap, some information that overlaps with the city training. Deadline for city training is March 28th. So again, just reminding you, if you have some time now, you can start going over the modules. It's not just one. And I said it before, I'm just saying again, the only thing I want you to do is submit through Moodle, the link, or the PDF, the certification of completion, or both, whatever you like, it doesn't matter, okay? As long as I know that you have completed that specific training. Make sure you don't miss the deadline. If you miss it, you miss it, okay? And then LO 13. We don't have a synchronous meeting, but we have office hours tomorrow from 8 in the morning until 12:30 in the afternoon. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and share a Moodle site. So March 15th. So this is what we're covering today: ethical principles in research and funding. So 2 LOs for next week, 12 and 13. Here is the city training that I was talking about, which will be due next Sunday. Okay, not this coming Sunday, the following Sunday after that. So if you want to do it now, start doing it now, will be great. Just trying to help you be proactive and not stress and enjoy it more, learn more, retain more information. That's it. All right, so that's about it. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to start sharing, as I always do, the first chapter. I find it, chapter 12. Let's see, chapter 12. Yes. So go here. Sorry about that. Here we go. So again, a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. You will address them when you're taking the city group training. If you have already, I'm guessing some parts of this chapter were easier for you. Okay, so move my face. So what we're gonna talk about today is mainly we are here in the designing and developing the study. So we're thinking about how to do it and if it's ethical or not. Okay. All right, so some key terms. We're going to address all of them little by little, as we always do. At the same time, I'm just reminding you there's a glossary at the end of each chapter. So, word that's coming from Greek word, ethos. Ethos in Greek, as you can see, is those guidelines that you use in order to live your life and make decisions. Okay? It's not that we all have the same, right? And it's not that we all perceive an action the same way. Okay? Something may be unethical for me. Sorry about that. That's Skype. Let me turn it off. So something may be ethical for me, but not for you, and vice versa, right? It has to do with many factors, and for example, cultural issues, right? All right, so here we're not gonna go into detail into ethics. I don't know if you like things like that. These are the three branches of normative ethics, and we have deontology, consequentialism, and virtue ethics. Each one of them focuses more on one thing. Before I even start going over those, I want to say that it's not that, and we're going to talk about this, whatever they're focusing on, that's the only thing they're focusing on, and they're not focusing on whatever the other branch is. Just that's where they mainly focus. They care about everything else, but that's their main thing. Okay? So in deontology, we care about the motive. So no matter what happened at the very end, if your intentions were ethical, the whole thing is considered ethical. Okay? And I'm sure a lot of people can make a case about it. Now, on the other side, consequentialism, sorry, it's a little bit hard for me, is more about the end result, right? And more so the consequences of the actions than the motive or the intention. Okay. Now, again, some of us can make a case that that's important or that's more important than the motive. Right. Now, virtue ethics has to do, it doesn't focus on the motives nor the consequences. It focuses on the virtue. And virtue it's a trait of character. an excellent trait of character, and it's a disposition. So what we mean by this disposition is not just a habit. So if we're saying the virtue of honesty, it's not just me being honest today about a specific action or whatever. It's me really believing in it, living by it, and using criteria that have to do with honesty in all aspects of my life and filtering all life around me. Okay, so that branch is focusing on virtue, and then we have another branch on the consequences of our actions, and then the first one was about the motive of our actions. Okay, now you can ask me, so you said research is great. You said our goal as scientists is to add on the knowledge that we already have. And now you're telling us that just concerning normative ethics, we have three branches or three disciplines, which are different. So which one are we going to pick? Well, that's a very complicated question. But an easier way to answer you is that if we go according to principlism, or here we can find some basic guidelines that no matter what you really believe, if you follow them, you're doing, for the most part, ethical research, right? And you see the four major components: autonomy, another Greek word, which means you have the freedom to choose for yourself, right? Also, beneficence, which means again that our goal is always like what leads us, what guides us, is always doing good, right? Another guide that we should have when we're doing research is that we're not looking to harm anybody. Okay, and concerning justice, the benefits and the burdens are distributed in a, I won't say fair way, but equal, or in a way that is depending on the specifics, the characteristics of the study, it's equally distributed based on whatever we're doing, of course. Why do we need all this? We could be having just a class just to talk about ethics. And it's a very interesting topic, and you can go really deep in philosophy if that's something that it's interesting to you. In Plattsburgh, we have the ethics department, and I was a fellow there for a semester, and we really studied things like that. But in terms of exercise science, right, we saw the basic guidelines. But before we go into specifics about exercise science, we need to see why we need ethics in research in general. Okay, you all know that the Nazis during the World War II did some horrific experiments on people. They would lower the temperature to see, how long they're going to survive or under which conditions, for example. So they would do things that we would never even consider now doing. And a lot of those scientists were caught, and they had to go to trial. And one of the basic, of course, argument is that, well, there was no law against it. There was no regulation against it. And we'll see what happened after those trials. Although they did horrific things, those things happened during war. Okay? And we're not excusing them, but these things happened during war, during a situation that there was no order in general. Imagine now horrible things happening, not during war, in an organized society, okay, like the US. So I'm gonna jump the green one, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna go to that purple box that you see here, the Tuskegee syphilis study. This study went for 40 years. And it's really interesting if you want to go and check it out, if you don't know it already. It's a classic example in any course that has to do with anthropology or ethics or research. So 400 people were recruited, 399 actually. And back then, there was an issue with syphilis, right? And they recruited them and they told them, you know, if you die, we're going to bury you for free. You're going to have some kind of medical attention for free. We just need to do some experiments on your blood. They never told them if they were sick or not. And on top of that, the most important thing you should remember is they never told them that at some point the medicine was discovered, penicillin was discovered. So even after it was discovered that it was working, you know, we have found the solution to the problem. They kept just observing their symptoms, taking blood samples, and just writing down what was happening to them. At some point, somebody blew the whistle, this thing stopped, and since then, you know, it's been used as an example of something completely unethical and immoral that can happen in any organized society, right? So that's a great example to show that that's why we need some kind of regulations, right? And I'm going to show you what happened after the Tuskegee study. Even HIPAA under Clinton, if you see his speech, you will see that he's talking about it, and he is very clearly taking responsibility on behalf of the official government. This happened, this is the crazy thing, that this happened, this thing was funded by the US government. Okay. And of course, since all of them were African American, you understand that it also shows a lot about systemic racism. It's bad, but at least we can learn from it. Pepper the donation, that's about a dog that was stolen and it was given to a facility in New York for experiments, died there, figured out later. Henrietta lacks the cells. So here what happened is a facility got some cells, cancer cells. They start doing studies and then they commercialize them in a way. They just started giving them left and right. And people were doing research on them, trying to discover studies based on the behavior of those cells without the consent of the patient. But back then, there was no need for consent, right? So now based on that again, we went ahead and created some regulations, okay? So these are 4 cases, and based on your perception, some of them may be worse than others, but all of them, as you see, helped trigger the community, worldwide community, to take some action and create some regulation, okay? So because of the Nazis getting trial, going to trial, we have the Nuremberg Code. One of the very first codes out there that had to do with regulations concerning research. And it was used by the US Department of Health and Human Services. Now, later on, the World Medical Association, 1964, created the Declaration of Helsinki. If you haven't heard of it, You probably see it when you take that city training. Of course, it has been modified many times since then because we evolved, and as we evolved, research evolves, and the regulation have to evolve as well. And then the Belmont report is very popular. You definitely you can't miss it in your training. You'll see that everything started in 1974 when a special committee was created, right? And as you see, they were trying to find a way to figure out the boundaries between healthcare practice and research. They established all this respect for persons, beneficence, and justice that we have talked about and we will talk about later on as we go on. Informed consent, okay? Risks and benefits, protection of vulnerable population, all this are things that are very important, and we'll talk about these as we go. The Bellman report, again, is something that you should remember. It's something that we are using in order to do research right now, okay, in the US. So you have a project, and that project is submitting a proposal, a research proposal. You can see here the 45 CFR 46, the common rule, okay? Based on that common rule, based on that becoming a federal law, we had the creation of the IRBs, the Institutional Review Boards. So we have those rules that we just mentioned as a Bellman report, but then the institutions themselves wanted to check whatever research was happening in those institutions, like SUNY Plattsburgh or a hospital. Okay, so those institutions have their own IRBs. Okay, and I will play the role of the IRB when you submit your proposal. So things that, minimal risk, okay, which is of course saying that being a participant in my research doesn't have any more risk than pretty much not participating. So pretty much the same risk. You have to address that, right? So there's no risk. There's an informed consent form, right? And that's something that you need to submit, where you say, this is who I am, this is why you're being recruited, this is what we're gonna do, this is how we're gonna do it, these are the risks and benefits, this is the chair of the IRB if you have additional questions, these are the precautions for privacy and confidentiality. A lot of information in there, okay? So they need to sign, because if they don't sign, then you cannot collect data from them, okay? In most cases, okay? In vulnerable populations, an example is pregnant women, prisoners, okay? And you'll see, even in the SUNY Plattsburgh application, you'll see that if you check those boxes, later on they're going to ask you for additional information. I had a conversation with one of you, and he wants to recruit adolescents in his project. Children are considered a vulnerable population. We'll see in a little bit that you need special. You need to receive access from their guardians or parents to do that, for example. Okay, so there's additional special populations for those special regulations for those special populations. And of course, the IACUC, it has to do with animals, and we'll see how that goes in a little bit. That's different. We have mentioned it, and we're gonna mention it again today. Now, although I covered this before, what do you put in informed consent? I gave you an example, or a couple of examples for the ones that you're gonna create. But in general, again, you put your name, you explain the project, you explain why they're being recruited, that there's no penalty if they decide to stop participating at any point. how you gonna protect privacy? What are you doing in terms of privacy and confidentiality? Who are the PIs, the primary investigators, or the co-PIs? There is the benefits, if there are any risks, but also benefits for that person. Because a lot of times, like, there's no benefits for you, but hopefully there are going to be benefits for the whole scientific community, because the data we're going to collect, are going to help us as a community decide about something. Okay, so it's not that you personally gonna see a specific direct benefit. Yeah. Also, in a way, you explain what you expect from the participants, but also what the participants should expect from you. Okay. And you see in our RB, we put down the name of our chair, of our RB or ethics committee, however you want to call it. So if somebody wants to ask more questions and bypass me, for example, let's say I'm the PI, the primary investigator, they can contact directly the chair of the RB. Sometimes we need to talk about it, not all of the times. It depends on the specifics of our research. So this is how it looks like in general, right? You see that there are kind of three paths. All the way to the left is the simplest of research that is exempt. You don't even need, for some reason, you don't even need RB approval in a way. Expedited is what happens with most of my research, 99%, right? Where you see that there's no need most of the time for the full board review. Okay, so we're here, right here. Usually just some or just the chair will approve or ask for more. For example, we submitted a project lately and we wanted to add something, so we added something, but because that something had to do with sexual behavior, they asked for additional information concerning privacy and confidentiality, and then I shared that, and then we got the actual approval. So now we can start data collection. So the point, no matter how you see it, is from up here to come down here. Now, a couple of things. One, I am gonna supposedly be this. Okay, so this is you writing all the study, and this is where I am. And this is where we're gonna stop. Kinda, right? I mean, we're gonna do all this, but we're gonna stop down here, to be honest. Okay, so we're not gonna go to the actual data collection. So we're gonna do all this together. Especially using the drafts, we're gonna have a very, very, very nice proposal. So at the end, I can be like, approved. Okay, your goal is to get approved, even in this mock process. Another thing I want to talk about is that usually when you you get approved, you don't get approved forever. Usually it's for a year. Okay. Now, every year, if I need more time, I have there's another process to do it. It's easier. You just ask for more time and say it's okay, cool, whatever. If something happens that wasn't unexpected, you need to report it back to the RB. Rarely happens, but it could happen. That's something else you can do after you have been approved and after you have started the data collection. Okay. Again, you're here. I'm the RB, and our goal is for you to get approved. This is more about animals, in a couple of things I want to point out is after you submit your protocol, it can be reviewed by some or everybody in the committee. Okay. And another thing is that you see there's an annual report, there's a 3-year renewal, depending on what you do. But I don't want to forget to tell you that these kind of committees have to review the facilities as well, regardless of your proposals or not, your facilities have to be reviewed. Okay, that's another interesting part here. All right, privacy. These are a couple of things I want to remember from this. So these are important things I'll do with research. Privacy. Privacy has to do more. It's an agreement that will happen through the consent form between you and the participant. It's very important, and it has to do with what kind of information, how much of that information, and how they're gonna share it with you, the investigator. That a lot of times we write that in the consent form that, for example, there's not going to be any penalty if they decide to answer to the 5 out of the 10 questions that you want them to answer. If they decide to just leave the whole thing in the middle, there's no penalty. There's no anything, nothing will happen between them and you personally or the department or the whole university, right? They're free to share any, as much, and in any way they want to share it, okay? Confidentiality now is more about the data units, the data that you have collected. And mainly is about de-identifying the data. So, for example, in a very recent project that we submitted, I talked about the location of my room, that I'm the only one who has access to my computer. I can lock the door, things like that, so nobody can go and check the data set. Also, that because there was an issue with email addresses and identifying who is saying what, we said that when we get those email addresses, we're not going to get them with names. We're just going to get the email addresses to just send out the surveys, right? Now, that person who will do that, and that person will collect the data, but when that person sends the data set to the person who will analyze the data, he won't include the email addresses. So now a second person has the data set without email addresses. That person will clean the data, that person will analyze the data, and then that person will send me the analysis to sit down and start writing the manuscript. I will not have access to the raw data set. I will only have access to averages and mean scores, standard deviations, or whatever we were looking for. So in that way, we're trying to blind a part from some researchers and another part from some researchers and then another part from other researchers. So in a way, nobody can take that final information and track it back to the person who participated. Okay? So again, and also another thing that we need to mention a lot of times is that we'll keep the data for 2 years. After that, the data will be deleted, destructed, or whatever, destroyed, and by this way, whatever way. Okay? That has to do with confidentiality. Question now. So here has to do with me making you participate, or me kind of making you participate in a specific way because I give you something in exchange. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of times we'll give some kind of incentives. We do it all the time, right? In a recent project that one of you is actually participating, and we submitted a grant proposal, right? We asked for some money to give away in the form of gift cards. Now, how much money and to whom and for what has to be explained, and a lot of it can be justified, right? Question happens when I'm kind of manipulating you to participate or to participate in a specific way, and then I give you something in return, right? And although it's irrelevant, I'm going to give this example to make you understand. When at the very end, we asked you, for example, to fill out those course opinion surveys that have to do with evaluating me in the course, I'm not allowed to give you extra credit, right? I'm not allowed to give you extra credit. Why? Because of something similar to this. Because I don't want you to think that this means this and in a way manipulate you to do it in a way that I would like you to do it, right? I already talked a little about the data and the samples. That's something very important in blood samples, any kind of, like I talked about data that have to do with opinions, right? This is more about, let's say, saliva, right? Yeah, saliva. Where are you keeping it? For how long are you keeping it? How are you gonna code it? And of course, although we will mention in a little bit, how are you gonna use it? You can just use it in other ways than the ways that you told me you're going to use it when you took that saliva sample. Okay? But in this case, what we're interested in more is who owns the data and what they're going to do with it and for how long. Okay? All right, so social media. What is public data? How can we use public data? That's really important. A lot of times, data sets go public, especially when you get funded by the government, the US government, or an institution that's affiliated with the government. Some data that I've been using, for example, after 2 years, they go public. They just went public a month ago. So now everybody has access to use them. But of course, it's de-identified data. Okay, we have to be very specific how we share data in the public, and also how we share any kind of public information as data. Okay. HIPAA. I talked about HIPAA, and HIPAA is mainly about privacy. And 1996, and it happened with Clinton. And you can go and see all those. It's very interesting how it went out, and it has been very, very helpful because again, we needed some extra regulations for security and privacy. That was really, really important. Now, GINA, Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So, it's very interesting. We have broken down almost 100% of our DNA. Now, the way we're going to use it is tricky. If we use it to help people, of course, and protect people and even predict conditions, that may be fine. Things get interesting if you really think about it when you start sharing my DNA and when, for example, an insurance company takes information about my DNA, and that information says, for example, that is possible that I get colon cancer by whatever, this kind of percentage. And then the insurance company denies my application because based on that, I was, let's say, grouped as a high risk. patient. So they kind of use it against me because now the information about my genetic predisposition is out there. Okay? So we need to be very, very careful with that. What it means and how we're using it. We are collecting data right now. Collect some here in Greece, some in Mexico, and actually 2 sites in Mexico that has to do with BDNF, the human gene, right? And we're trying to find some kind of correlations with psychological constructs such as mental toughness. Very interesting projects, but we need to be very careful with what we're doing with that information, the inferences of the results, and it is again it going back to privacy and confidentiality. This is some kind of information that it should be very, very, very well protected. Okay. All right. So that's it. That was our first chapter, and I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna start sharing the second chapter for today, chapter 13, which is about funding. All right. So we're gonna switch gears. Okay. Here we go. So you see there's a specific, it's actually the same wording, funding right here, that has to do, again, that affects how you develop your study, because if it needs funding, it will just affect everything, obviously. So let's see what it is, less terms, but we're going to explain everything, and why we need it, when we need it, and how we could get it, okay? So there's some projects that, for whatever reasons, they need resources, and that includes time, that includes could be needles, it could be specific labs, lab equipment, disposables, specific people with specific expertise. And in those cases, for example, if you need to buy the equipment, and without that equipment you cannot do it, you will go out and look for funding. Okay? There are many ways to get funding, and many institutions, organizations that could help you out, but also there are many, many people who apply for that money. Now, me, I haven't gotten a lot of, I have got my funding in general, if you put it all together, is just some tens of thousands of dollars, which is peanuts. So I haven't really gotten a lot of funding, but that depends on a lot of things I will see in a little bit. One thing to distinguish about funding, it could be internal. So I can go to my own institution, SUNY Plattsburgh, which I have, and get money, which I have, for example, to buy equipment. So I've gotten 8,000, 12,000, 7,000, buy this. I make a case, and they give me the money, they may not, and then I go out and buy the equipment that I need. I've also gotten seed money, which is, seed money means we got it 2 years ago, for example, to there was specific competition within SUNY Plattsburgh. So they give you some money to collect some preliminary data, and then with that data to go out and look for external funding. Okay. So external funding is anything outside. It can be a donor, It can be NIH. It can be any foundation that's interesting. Anything can be. Anything that is not your institution is external. Okay. So there are many, or you can be ACSM, right? ACSM gives away some money. And that's where we have gone with that student that is part of this class. And we submitted our proposal to get some money. We submitted at ACSM, okay? Now, again, there's some project that requires zero money. Most of my projects, okay? That could mean a lot of things, but definitely means that it's easier for me to do a $0 project because I don't need to find the money. So I don't count on others. Okay, so I put in the time, I put in my own time, my own effort, my own energy. That's about it. Okay. Another thing that I didn't cover and that's important in my job is a lot of times when I want to do the research, I need the time to do the research. So if I don't have the time, a lot of times part of that funding is I get the funding, I get the money, and I go to my chair and to my dean, and I'm like, I'm buying out my time. So if they were supposed to pay me for this specific course, right, X amount of money, but I need this time to do the research, I include it in my proposal, right? And I go to my chair, and the department gets the same amount of money, so they let me do the research and not teach that course. They give it to somebody else. But I'm paying my time. Does that make sense? Okay. You definitely need to figure out what is important right now. The interest changes all the time, and that affects where those institutions, organizations want to allocate the money. So the third dot is if you were submitting for a grant right now, of course you could start with your advisor or some senior faculty help you out. This is an example, right? It's in millions of dollars. That has to do just with NIH, National Institute of Health, which is classic. A lot of other institutions follow their lead, but it's not the only thing. Everybody wants to get some funding from NIH, but there's so many others right here and there. Also, you see those pieces of the same pie, right? Even Batten disease gets 4, but the thing is that I don't know if it's a lot or not. What we should get out of this is the percentages and the portions of that funding, where it goes. Okay, so in a way, if you were doing cancer, right, or biotechnology, it looks like that there's a high probability. Of course, you don't know how many people are applying for these grants. But this is just to show you that there's a focus of funding towards specific areas. Some practical considerations about the topic of your proposal if you're trying to get funded. You look at what they're looking for. So if you go for a specific program, as we went, for example, for ACSM, and they were looking for physical and psychological benefits of physical activity, if you do not submit something that has to do with that, of course, you're not going to get funded. So the closer your idea is to that, the higher the probability to get funded. I think that's clear. Also, if you're working under me, for example, it should be something kind of relevant of what I'm doing because of the facilities that we have, and if you need my support, right? Of course, if it's part of your dissertation, of course, you need to involve your doctoral committee and then design the proposal. Now, why you wouldn't get funded? for many reasons. You just wrote a bad proposal. You don't justify that this money is needed. You don't justify that this amount of money is needed. You cannot justify that you can actually pull it off. You cannot justify that for many reasons, because you don't have the experience, you don't have the equipment. Um, your methodology sucks in a way. They don't like the way you will collect the data or analyze the data or the whole design of the study. They may not think that you're doing something different enough to get funded, or then you don't. They may not think that you're doing something that for the amount of the money that you're asking is significant enough. So they may give it to somebody else um, who, let's say, is trying to investigate something that affects, in a very simplistic way, more people. Okay. When you applying for money is a whole thing, right? It takes a lot of time, a lot of people. In the beginning, it's just like, oh my god, so much paperwork, right? But and they will ask you whatever they want to ask you based on the specifics. In general, you have an executive summary. You need to explain the lit review, the gap, why you need to do it, what are you going to do, and the expected outcomes and the expected significance of those outcomes. Okay. Of course, usually there's a separate sheet that talks about budget, which is most of the time itemized. So you may say, I'm asking for 532,676.2 dollars, and you have to itemize everything. And so there's subtotals, and then there's a total, and you explain exactly why you need it, what you need. The why you need it, usually you have additional space somewhere, and you submit it with your actual budget, like a table, or it may be included in that first sheet that we were talking about, where you explain anything else. Also, the timeline explains that, once you get approved, this is what we're going to do. This by then we're going to do this. By then we're going to have the first result. We're going to do this report by then, and then we're going to collect. Everything has to be everything has to be put in a way, in terms of time, and explain to that committee that is reading your proposal that you pretty much have everything figured out, and it looks very, very, very doable. Okay. Now, in general, when you ask for money, you see here four principles that the committee will take under consideration as they're reading your budget. Reasonableness. So you're asking for something, and the amount also is reasonable. I'll use the example I used before. If they're paying me X amount of money to pay this course, and I want a course release, that's what it's called, I need to put the exact same amount of money in the budget. Okay, I can just put double. That doesn't make sense, so they wouldn't accept it. Okay, allocability. I can't put irrelevant things in there. I can't put, I want a ticket to go to Greece. If it's relevant, sure, maybe. But if it's irrelevant, of course, why? Allowability. A lot of times when you're submitting budgets, they will tell you, we can fund, give you a lot of examples, but we wouldn't fund office supplies. So if you put office supplies in there, or, excuse me, they wouldn't pay for an external person that would give you advice. They wouldn't pay for that. If you put it in there, the whole thing is in. Why would they say yes? The consistency is about things that is Under similar conditions, other people ask something that is expected in a way. It's kind of normal, ordinary, right? For whatever you are asking money to do. Now, everybody wants to go to NIH, but there's so many institutions in the government that will give you money. For us in exercise science, ACSM, APS, a lot of times local things around your area, or just in New York. You can go global. SUNY Plattsburgh is in a system called SPIN, S-P-I-N, and they give you specific password. I can log in and I can see what's out there. I can put keywords and I can see what's out there globally in terms of funding. Right? I can find something in Australia and then try to see if I can apply, if I'm eligible, for what should I do, by when, what are they asking for, what I can do, stuff like that, the amount, everything. So it really there are a lot of institutions out there that I don't even know, and a lot of times I'm like, oh my god, these people gave away all that money, I didn't know about it. So it's not just the government, right? Those are some. This is some advice about writing a good research proposal when you're asking for money, and we covered a lot of them. Let's see if we didn't cover something. The team a lot of times plays a big role. Who's going to support you? People on those panels that decide who's getting funded or not really take into consideration the weight of somebody who has been involved in similar research for years and has been funded and so on. So if I want to do something about postpartum women and I don't know, gain with diabetes, I don't know, something like that. And I could pull in the person in that line of research, that will help me a lot. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So here, these are some criteria for the NIH. We're using NIH because we're giving away a lot of money and a lot of people are following again their lead. You can see significance, innovations, and some things that you'll see a lot, right? Why is this significant, and why is this different, innovative in any way? You have to make a case that you have to prove because we have those scoring scales, and you need to get the highest score possible. So at the end, your total score is high enough, so you may go to the next phase and the next phase, and hopefully at the end get funded. It's not easy. It's very intense in terms of time, and energy, and you may end up with nothing. But it's a probability game. The more you submit your ideas, the higher the probability to get eventually funded. Okay. A good grant tells a story. Of course, and that goes to your project as well. You need to start with the bigger picture and start slowly bring it home and make a case about everything and prove that you and not the person next to you, should get funded based on the topic, on the people that participate, on the timeline, on how you're going to do it, on the significance of the expected outcomes, or anything. You have to prove that you have the best idea and you're the best person to lead this project. Okay. All right. Now that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for being here and watching. So for next week, again, I want to say that we have LO10 and LO13. Office hours tomorrow from 8 to 12:30. No synchronous meeting. Let me know if you need anything. I will be more than happy to connect with you. And that's it. I don't have anything else. That's pretty much it. Thank you guys. Have a good week. Bye-bye.